Good morning. Welcome to First Baptist. I'm Josh Brock. We're going to be worshiping today to a King that has risen, and He is speaking, and He is healing, and whatever you're facing, whatever it might be, sometimes I think if I was like the children of Israel and I had the pillar of fire and the cloud, I would be happy to be able to walk out and just go, there it is, and I'm glad you're here. The truth is that when He died and He rose again, He came and He lives in here. And all I have to say is, Lord, I know you're here. I don't need a pillar of fire and a cloud, as I have your Holy Spirit. Lord, we thank you for today. We thank you that you're here, that you've been here, that you're going to be here, that you're faithful. We praise you for all the things that you've done, God. We praise you for the things that you're doing, the things that you've been doing that we didn't know anything about. We're thankful, God, that you're in control and that even in the messes that I've made, you're still King. And in my weakness, your strength is made whole. We praise you for today. We thank you and we give you glory and honor. Praise
Why don't you have a seat? I'm Kyle Henderson. I'm pastor here at First Baptist Church.
And I'm Blake Williamson. I'm pastor of young adults in groups. Here, let me just lean up against you right there. Is that good?
That's great.
That's great?
That's a great.
Totally comfortable and normal?
Very natural.
Very natural pose there, too.
That's right.
Yes. So we'll get to that announcement, right?
Right. Not for now.
But
later.
not for now.
Okay. First, we want you to look in the seat back in front of you to some cards that are there.
The first card is a blue card. It says guest at the top. If you're visiting with us this morning, we're so thankful that you came and chose to worship with us. If you'd like for us to be able to reach out and connect with you, you can just put your information on there. And the second one is for all of us, it's a prayer card. So we believe in prayer here. We would love to be praying for you. So if you know someone that needs prayer or you need prayer, please let us know.
There's an offering envelope at the back of the pile. It helps facilitate giving. We'd love for you to put money in there. You can put any of that stuff in the offering baskets, which are at the back of the church and here at the front. There's also a green card that's a membership card. It tells you how you can join our church, how to become part of our community. Now, guests, we're not expecting you to give anything. Our members give because they love our church, they're committed to our ministry and our mission, and we'd love to have you come be part of our team. Now, let me draw your attention to the handout that you were given when you came in.
A couple of announcements. We're going to start at the bottom this time. At the bottom, you'll see Youth Night is going to be on Wednesday, October the 11th. This is a product of Love Thy Neighbor, and so our youth from around the town are going to get together at the Methodist Church at 6:30 on Wednesday, October 11th. It's going to be a great time. See them worship together, and as God continues to work in the youth in our town. And also, it's that time of year, Kyle.
State Fair, baby.
State Fair. Howdy, folks. So if you're interested in going to that, October 5th, they're going to be doing that 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. That is a full day. We will call that a full day. So
full day.
If you're excited about that, you can scan the QR code. If you have any questions, you can contact the church office.
The one above that is about Alpha. We have Alpha tonight and tomorrow night. We're in session 4, How Can I Have Faith? And we're going to be having spaghetti. It's going to be great. Even if you've not come to Alpha, you can come any of the nights. We want you to know what Alpha is. We want you to see how Alpha works. We want you to connect to other people in our church. This is a long-term project in our church. How do we win people to Christ? How do we lead people who are far away from Christ into a relationship with Christ? Alpha is an investment in that process and that plan. We'd love for you to come and know a little bit more about it. The new dates on there is our mini retreat. Part of Alpha is to take a little bit of time away from your normal schedule. It's going to happen on a Friday night and a Saturday, and I want you to see those dates and maybe get them on your calendar. There's also an insert that has to do with the yard signs. So we're going to start with yard signs. You can see yard signs in the back. You can see yard signs here. There's yard signs in the Global Cafe. We have 100 yard signs for our church. We're supposed to put up 100 yard signs. We need to do it today. Now, here's some rules. You can't put up a yard sign unless you ask permission to put up the yard sign. You can't just drive by and stick them in places.
Rogue, right? We're not going to kind of do that Banksy version
not doing that.
of graffiti art of so it's a yard sign. It goes in
a yard. Or in front of a business could also do.
With permission.
Yeah, with permission, right. Permission. And so we want the community. There's 650 being put out today. We want people everywhere to see it like, oh, everybody's in on this. And so if you got a neighbor that you know that you could get them to put one in their yard because they go to one of our churches that are doing this. We want to make sure they're everywhere. Please help us get one today and put it somewhere today.
Quick show of hands. How many of you have a yard?
Have a yard?
Have a yard. There you go. All right. We've got a sign for you.
You qualify, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Please get them and take them with you. Secondly, look at the sheet. There's a schedule there of things that are going to be happening. Relational evangelism training is happening. Prayer is happening. Faith Fest is happening on that day. The first thing that's actually going to be happening is an all-community worship service. The date and time, that same date, but the time, 11 o'clock. So our leadership team is in the process of talking about how our church is going to handle that. My hope and hunch is some version of we're not going to have 11 o'clock service in here on that morning. And we're going to have 11 o'clock service with other Christians at the Kane Center. Last year they had over 1,000. I think we hope that there's over 1,500, 1,800 people gathered from Christian community around Athens, worshiping together for that hour. And then Faith Fest will happen later that afternoon as we invite people. So the back of that is about inviting people. people. So how are you going to be participating in this? There's two things. You can invite people you know and people you don't know. Now, there's people that you know that you could invite. There's people maybe that are distracted and have been going to church for a while. This would be a great moment to invite them to a place where lots of Christians in our community are doing the same thing. Say, see, this is a great place to be. Second thing you could do is you could invite somebody that's just a little on the edge and that they knew you were going and you went with them, that y'all could come together. Third thing, you could find somebody around and say, do you have a church home? Do you have a place that you go to church? There's going to be all of us together. Why don't you come? Notice the statistics. Like if you invite somebody to come with you, their chance of making a decision for Christ go way up. So maybe there's somebody you could start praying now for them so that you could invite them to Faith Fest at the end of the month. Now, there's a tab. We've kind of made it where you could tear off the bottom and you could write the name or the names of people that you're praying for, and you could put them in the prayer wall for this month and say, God, would you give me a chance to invite them to Faith Fest this year? We hope that you're going to do that. Now, a couple other things we want to say.
Are they theirs to keep forever?
You can keep the sign if you promise not to throw it away, if you want to put it out next year, because we're going to keep these. Or you can bring the sign back after Faith Fest and we'll store them and then redistribute them. They were made specifically so they could be used year after year after year.
And lastly, the gathering.
The gathering.
The gathering.
Gathering.
It's been a while because it's been 120 degrees outside every day.
That's right. So now that temperature's gone back down, several people are saying, can we do it? And so we said, we're starting next week. The gathering will be happening right out there. It's going to come back gathering 2.0. So there's going to be some other things that are going to be happening. And so we want you to come and try it out and see how that's working. I know that I miss it because I don't get to see our bilingual friends, but if they come there, we get to connect every Sunday. And I get to see people from both services, but you don't. And so I think it's a great place to just get relationships going and remind each other that we're all in this together. All right, now we're going to get you to greet each other in the name of the Lord. Two things you want to do when you get up. Make sure that you get a Lord's Supper cup. We'll be celebrating Lord's Supper at the end of my sermon. And the question of the day is, what does your name mean? What does your name mean? No, and let me say, I need to clarify. You said it means you're in trouble if you use your whole name.
When my parents said my whole name,
I want to know, like,
trouble.
what are the origin of the words and what do they mean? All right, get up, greet each other in the name of the Lord. Here.
I'm going to take this one with me.
That's going to be yours, huh?
Yes.
So this week there was Saw You at the Pole because they had See You at the Pole. Saw You at the Pole is a service that they have in the evening on Wednesday night. And Steve Eccles and I, and Keaton and Kathy, and I don't know how many churches were there. There was like 245 kids, I believe. And we worshiped, and those kids were just amazingly into worship. And it was really electrifying, honestly, as a musician. And being at the front of the stage is kind of neat because you get to see what's going on, you know. And so at the end of the service, I had a really good service. The guy that preached, he actually spoke very, very truthfully and about his life and some things, and was honest with those kids. And I think there was 6 or 7, maybe a little bit more, that actually gave their heart to God. And I was really moved by that. And I know that there's been some things that's been going on with TVCC and the players, and God is moving. And if you feel like you're not part of that, if you feel like you're missing out on that, this Faith Fest and joining in and coming to the events that we have at church, it gives us unity. And I think that's a big thing right now, because we have a hope and we have a truth that we should be sharing. And sometimes people look at our lives and say, you're just the same as me. You just have another guy to hold you accountable. And you fail him, and I do. But the point is that the more that we can show, I may not have every theological agreement with you, but in the same breath, I serve the same God, and he is true, and he will teach me, and he will guide me. And he is my firm foundation. And sometimes I just need to revisit that moment, like when I was one of those 6 or 7 that gave my heart to God, and say, I want to meet that guy that I was so excited to see. I want to come and I want to worship you. And I want to worship you with your body in your presence. I'm telling you, God's moving. And we're going to be part of this Faith Fest. I don't know how many musicians are going to be part of it. And I'm excited to see what happened, because we had the Love Thy Neighbor here not too long ago. It was awesome. And I don't think it has anything to do with denomination. I don't think it has anything to do with a church name. I think people want to see a unified church that's giving truth and hope. And we have to say that he is the cornerstone, the chief cornerstone. He's our firm foundation. Christ is my firm foundation. Christ is my firm foundation. The rock on which I stand when everything around me is shaking. I've never been more glad, 'cause I put my faith in Jesus. He's never let me down. He's faithful through generations. just wanna sit here at your feet. I'm caught up in this holy moment. I never wanna leave. Oh, I'm not here for blessings. Jesus, you don't owe me anything more than anything that you can do. I just want you. And I'm sorry when I've just gone through the motions. I'm sorry when I just sang another song. Take me back to where we started. I open up my heart to you. And I'm sorry when I've come with my agenda. I'm sorry when I forgot that you're enough. Take me back to where we
Heavenly Father, it's so easy for us to substitute things for you. It's so easy to depend on other things but you. We ask, God, that you might help us to trust completely in you, to let go of all sorts of things that we are holding on to that are not you. Open our minds that we might learn from you. Open our hearts and our spirits, God, that we might receive you today. Open your word that we might have truth today. And this will we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. I'd love it if you had a Bible, if you'd get that Bible out and get ready in Exodus chapter 1 and 2 that we're going to be looking at it today. We start today a 5-week series on the life of Moses, this great deliverer of his people. We're going to talk about his origin story and the turn when everything changed for him, and then the kind of results as we look at this story arc that we've been looking at all year. These different characters, there's always the moment that we meet them and what God's doing at that particular moment. And so as I was getting ready for the sermon, for me, I needed to think about the whole story for a minute, because I was looking at this arc and trying to figure out which thing happened in which part of the story. And so I went and I just typed in Moses timeline. I assumed somebody had done what I wanted to do, and I wanted to see a timeline that was going to tell me about the book of Exodus and then the other books that Moses wrote and how they fit into the story. I wanted to know where he was at that different time period, and I wanted to know how long it all took. And I never could find it, so here's the one that I created that I'm still working on to try to get clear in my head how this story works itself out. The top line in the red, that's the books of the Bible. So the book of Exodus, Leviticus is written in a very short window of time, just a month or so. Then the book of Numbers, and then the book of Deuteronomy, again, about a 7-month period of time covered in the book of Deuteronomy. So these two tiny slabs, these two long things, and the book of Exodus. At the bottom, if you see in the blue, this is the long span of Moses' life, and there's 3 main sections to his life. His time from his being born till he goes in exile to Midian, from exile in Midian till he's back in Egypt, and then from Egypt until he's in the wilderness and on the edge of the Jordan River. And those are each 40-year segments, about 120 years in length of time. And what I want you to see today is we're going to be looking at Exodus chapter 2. That is a 9-month period of time, ultimately, just a few months period of time, right at the beginning. And then there's a 40-year gap between Exodus 2, 1 to 10 and Exodus 2, 11, which we're going to get to next week. So 40 years of Moses' story is over by the time we get to Exodus chapter 2, 11. And then another 40 years before he's 80 before he comes back to Egypt and does the significant work of his life. God is doing all the building in the first 80 years. And that's the section that we need to think about and look at, and that's covered in the very beginning chapters of the book of Exodus. So just zoom in just a little. So Exodus 2, 1 to 10 is the main focus of today. Now, what this book is setting up in chapter 1 is the bridge between what happened in the book of Genesis to what's getting ready to happen. And in chapter 1 of the book of Exodus, it tells the story of how the people of God, they came from Israel, they moved to Egypt following Joseph, who was there. Joseph and his brothers set up shop there. Their families grow. They become very prosperous. They live in this section of land. And then a new ruler comes to Egypt. And the period of time that all happens, that's described in chapter 1, is about 450 years. So chapter 1 is about 450 years in the book of Exodus. And it just recounts that little story. So just for a minute, what was 450 years ago? That's like 1570. like what was going on in 1570 in our world. That's when Francis Drake sets out on a boat to circumnavigate the world for the first time. 1570, like America is not even a glimmer in anyone's imagination. There's people living here, but nobody's thinking about a new country. Or 1570, that's all. That's how long it was that they were away from the time that Joseph had come there. And so there's a big gap of time. And into the middle of this big gap of time comes somebody, and what they do is they enslave the Israelites. The Hebrew people become enslaved. And their fortune goes from being on top to being on bottom very rapidly. And it's into that context that the people that are running the slaves become fearful of the slaves. In fact, the slave population, the Hebrew population, it continues to grow. And so the Egyptians decide we need to drive that population down. And so the Pharaoh makes a plan. He says, well, we're going to kill all the boys. And he conscripts some people into his service to try to get them to kill the boys. And then that plan doesn't work. And so then he decides, I'm going to get all the Egyptians in on the plan. We're going to kill all the boys. And that gets us to Exodus chapter 1, verse 22, and then chapter 2. So let me read that. Exodus 1, 22. Then Pharaoh gave this order to all his people. Every Hebrew boy that is born must be thrown into the Nile, but let every girl live. Now, a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. And when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch, and she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. And then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. So she saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to get it. She opened it and saw the baby, and he was crying, and she felt sorry for him. This is one of the Hebrew babies, she said. And then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you? Yes, go, she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you. So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she named him Moses, saying, I drew him out of the water. As we read this story, we come upon one of God's patterns. So God deals with us the same way over time. God says he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. God deals with you and I through patterns. There's his processes that if we go through these processes, they have the same result over and over again. And here's one of the processes that we meet here. God commissions an unlikely deliverer who will draw his child out of certain death and deliver him to a new future with a new home and a new name. This is a pattern we see in the scripture over and over and over again, an unlikely deliverer. Because I think that's what all of us feel about ourselves. We'd be unlikely to ever do anything. The amount of people that come to God and say, I can't, not me, you couldn't use me, they're depreciating themselves. God uses unlikely people because he uses people. An unlikely deliverer comes up and there is a problem somebody is facing, certain death, that if they keep going the way they're going, it isn't going to turn out good for them. And so God says, I've got something to happen. I'm going to get a deliverer. And that deliverer is going to give them an entirely new future. It's going to give them a new place to be, going to give them a new name. So we see this pattern over and over again. We just finished the story of Saul. You think about that, right? Saul is an unlikely deliverer everywhere he goes, but he is unlikely. He is delivered by a guy who's like, I can't go to him. He's going to kill me. And God says, no, I want you to go. And then Saul becomes Paul. I mean, this kind of thing happens all through the Bible. God commissions an unlikely deliverer who's going to come to somebody who's in trouble and help them out, right? And it happens in 4 stages. God's people are in jeopardy. Somebody's in trouble. There's a problem. God steps into the trouble. He cares about the person in trouble. God commissions a deliverer. You're the one to help in the problem. And then the deliverer acts on the behalf of God. So this is the pattern we're going to see in this story. And then I hope you'll see it in your story and where you might be. So let's look at the chapter 1. I was telling you there in chapter 1, we face the story for the first time, which is the first extermination project of the Pharaoh to get rid of the Hebrew babies. He comes to the midwives. Now, the midwives are the ones that are going to be with the women to help them deliver their babies, and they're trained in their world, and they're going to, they're as close to a doctor as this woman's ever going to see, and they show up. And the Pharaoh gets the midwives together, and he says, you guys are on the front line of this, and you see them right as they're being born. And he says, what I want you to do is if you're giving a Hebrew a chance to give birth, when you see, as you're delivering the baby, that it's a boy, kill it. If it's a girl, you can let it live. If it's a boy, kill it. So he gets them in on it. Here's the message. Here's the Pharaoh. Now, most of these Hebrew midwives, they did not sign up for that. What they signed up for was life. They signed up for joy, right? They didn't sign up to have to oppose the Pharaoh. They never thought about being political creatures. They were never going to walk on a picket line. They were midwives. But then God steps in. The midwives, however, feared God. See, that's what God does inside of a person, in your conscience, when God speaks to you and says, what you're doing is wrong. Because the Bible says God is actively in our lives, guiding us with his Spirit in the world. This is the place that God speaks to us. He's trying to speak to you right now. He wants you to discern between right and wrong. And here these Hebrew midwives were, and they feared God, and they knew that this was wrong. Because if you don't have a God view, if you don't have God in your life, then you can do whatever you want to do. You're not bound by any kind of rules in the world. Here was the Pharaoh. He was considered a god, and he's telling you this is what you're supposed to do. But they knew that there was a God above that. They knew there was a one true God, and they said, I'm going to follow the one true God. A lot of you live in a world in which there's people above you, powerful people, and you're having to decide, am I going to listen to the powerful people of this world, or am I going to listen to holy God? Am I going to give in to what the people around me want me to do, or am I going to listen to holy God? The Hebrew midwives heard God, and they said, God's the one. These midwives, they acted. They were unlikely deliverers. Nobody would have thought they were the ones that everything was going to hinge on, but they said no. When the Pharaoh came to him and the plan was failing, he said, why did my plan fail? And they said, oh, these Hebrew women, they're awesome. They don't deliver like Egyptian women. Like, they deliver on the run, right? We can't ever get there. They've already delivered by the time we get there. The baby's all alive. And so we're not bound by your rules. And so that we can't help you out. They said no. I love documentaries, and I like, Cindy says I like really depressing, dark things, war movies, stuff that blows up. I love stuff about World War II, and this documentary came on. I just want to know, how many of you have seen it? Yeah, me and one other person maybe. All right, so Netflix knows me. I kind of hate that, but Netflix like, oh, we just released this today. You're the target audience. You should watch this. It's called Ordinary Men. It's about the killing squads in World War II, the first group of men that were told, we need you to go exterminate the Jews. They were the ones that got the very first orders. And they were mostly in the occupied territories. Belgium, the Netherlands, Latvia, Lithuania, those areas, right? These are the first guys that get these orders. And the orders are very explicit. And they're not given killing chambers, they're not killing the gas stations, they're given a gun and bullets. And they say, we want you to go and kill Jews. Now, the first order given to the first guy, the guy gets up and he tells everybody, this is what we're going to do. And he says, but if you don't want to do this, you don't have to do it. And a bunch of them said, I don't want to do it. And they stepped down. They were not punished. They were not demoted. They were not transferred. In the whole time that Jews were killed, there's not a single person in the German power structure that is ever disciplined for not killing Jews. Not a single time. But they did it anyway. They didn't stand up and say no. Because this is the way people are. People just fall into line with what everybody else is doing, even if it's evil. These midwives, these unlikeliest of people, they said, no, I'm not going to do it. And they let the boys live. What are you willing to do? What wouldn't you do? It sets up Pharaoh's plan B. Pharaoh's plan B, chapter 1, verse 22. Then Pharaoh gave this order to all his people. Every Hebrew boy that is born you must throw into the Nile. Let every girl live. You see a little Hebrew boy, they're walking down the sidewalk next to the river. You see the little boy, get the little boy, throw him and drown him in the river. Kill them all. Stakes had changed. Instrument had changed. Death was there and real. We know that this was real jeopardy. Like this isn't just some made up story. For instance, there's a town called Ramses. We know about it from archaeological digs. Underneath Ramses is the town of Avaris. And Avaris is where Joseph and his brothers and their family, this is where they settled. Then lots of things happen over 450 years. And this town keeps getting built upon itself. It gets flooded, it gets rebuilt. And by the time the children of Israel leave, they leave from Ramses. It's one of the places they leave from. But before that, it was Avaris. And down at Avaris, they found a cemetery, and they dig up the cemetery and they see who's buried in the cemetery. And what they find is in Avaris, the amount of young children who are dead and buried there is super high. In fact, when they go and identify the bodies there, it was found that 50% of the children that were there dead died within the first 3 months. So way out of whack. They go to other places, not like this. It's a very unusual cemetery. And they did some projections based on who was buried later in life, who made it to adulthood. 60% female, 40% male. Also very unusual. They depressed the male population by killing male babies in the area. Now, they didn't succeed in getting rid of all the males, did they? There would have been zero, but they didn't get rid of all of them because people said no. Real jeopardy. God heard the groaning of the people. Now, we aren't told about this until Exodus chapter 2, verse 24, which is at the end. But we know when it says God heard, it was talking back about the time when he provided Moses, because it's not till 80 years later that anybody understands what happened when Moses was born. They didn't know he was going to be the deliverer, but God knew. God heard the people, and he knows you, and he knows what you're going through, and he steps into that in our world. And he prepares a deliverer. Now, a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. A Levite, a slave life is going to become a deliverer. Now, there's two different pathways going on. There's the palace and there is the slaves. And at the palace, they had everything. And there then is, within the story of the deliverer, there's a sub-story. That's the middle section of the passage that I read. Because it says, okay, baby is in jeopardy. New baby is in jeopardy. Not just all of them. There's this one baby that's in jeopardy. He's been given a death sentence. We got to get rid of this kid. The baby is born, and they're like, what are we going to do about this? And so God commissions a deliverer, and he commissions a mom. Baby is born. She hides the baby for 3 months. But then that's not going to work. And so the sister gets involved in the process in order to promote his life. And then the daughter of Pharaoh gets involved in the process, a super unlikely deliverer. And she sees the baby and says, this is one of the Hebrew babies. She knows exactly who he is. And then there's the actions that they all take. The basket on the water. The question that gets inserted into the conversation when the sister shows up. And the adoption by Pharaoh's daughter. And Pharaoh's daughter, at the end of it, she says, this deliverer, I'm going to give him a name. This kid, I'm going to give him a name. She gives him the name, it says Moses, which is somewhat the whole point of the story. He gets a name. And it's saying his name means something. In Egyptian, the name Moses means to be born. You know enough Egyptian because you know King Tut. How many of you have ever heard of King Tut? Right? Funky Tut. Right? Tut. His name was Tutmosis. He was born of Tut. That is, Thot was born. Thot was one of the Egyptian gods. Phot was one of the Egyptian gods. Ah is one of the Egyptian gods. You add the word Moses on there, and it means this one was born. Moses' name means to be born, but it is similar, connected to a Hebrew word, which means to draw out, which can see that's the birthing process, to be drawn out. But it's also a play on where he was found in the water, that he's drawn out. Now, the form of the word that they give him his name should have been Mashui, he who is or was drawn out. But that's not the form of the name that she gives him. She gives him the form of the name, he who draws out, the one who draws out. What an amazing thing that happens in his name, because it's both an Egyptian name and a Hebrew name, and it is casting into the future who he's going to be, because God knew who he was going to be from the beginning. There's a problem. God steps into the problem. He lifts up an unlikely deliverer, and the unlikely deliverer then acts, and that's chapter 2 to the end. It's the actions of the unlikely deliverer. That's the rest of the book. So we're going to get to that over the next few weeks, but I want to stop at this one and say, what are some lessons, some simple lessons I can learn and apply from this particular story that might apply to me today? The first one I want you to think about is sometimes you got to put the basket in the water. For 3 months, this mother did everything she could to protect this little boy. She tried to keep him quiet. She tried to keep him fed. She tried to keep him safe. Now, that's what parents are like, right? That's what we're like. And we have continued to expand this circle, and we call it helicopter parenting now, because people are trying to keep kids within that kind of circle for as long as possible. But I'm telling you, at some point, you got to put the basket in the water, and you've got to trust with faith the plan of God. And your job is not to build a wall around a kid, but to build character and confidence in a child, so that when you put them in the water, God's going to be able to use their life, and he's going to take them where they need to go. You got to have faith. You got to put them in the water. There comes a time, many times actually in the lives of our children, where we have to put the basket in the water. We have to let go and trust the plan of the Father. But it's not just children, it's our own lives. You can do everything you can to make yourself safe and make it convenient and make it easy. And then sometimes you got to put the basket in the water and say, God, wherever this goes, I'm going to go with you. I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust, God, that you know more than I do, that you love me more than I love you, that your plan is better and best. Sometimes I'm just going to trust and put it in the water. That's number one. Where is God stretching your faith right now? I need you to operate in faith. Secondly, you were designed with a purpose. You're designed with a purpose. God knew from the foundations of the world who you're going to be. He gave you and called you into his big purpose. Go into the whole world and bless all the nations. Jesus reiterates it. I want you to go into the whole world and teach them everything that I have taught you. Teach them how to be my disciples. He said, this is everybody's plan, but then there's your plan. Because the Bible says For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Because God knew who you were and where you're going to be and who you're going to live, and knew what challenges you were going to face, and he knew what the situation was going to be in our community, and he knew what was going to happen in your family, and he created you to be a deliverer. He created you to be the hero of a story, to stand into a story and say, God, you put me here on purpose, and there's thousands of them in your life. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I went with a group of our young leaders in our church to a conference. And during the conference, I had to go take a phone call. And I was in the phone call, and it made me late. And I was trying to hurry to get back to one of the sessions that we were all in. And as I was walking through the main lobby, there was a table about this size. And there was a guy standing here, and there was a girl standing there. And the guy standing here, I needed to deliver a message to him. And the only reason I knew that I needed to deliver a message to him is because on the phone call that I had just taken, this guy said, look, if you see any of these people, I need you to deliver a message to them. I authorize you to send them a message. And I was like, okay, that's great. And the only reason I knew I needed to deliver that message to this guy is because I'd heard that guy 4 hours earlier say he knew that guy. It was crazy. I was like, and so I come up here and I say, oh, I guess God needs me to deliver this message. And so I'm standing here waiting my turn to tell this guy the message that this guy told me to send to him that I think he needs to hear. And this girl says, you know, I got invited to go to the Lausanne conference in Korea next year, but I don't think I'm going to go. I don't know too much about it. In fact, she mispronounced the conference. Now, if you hear the Lausanne conference, you might not care about it, but I care deeply about it because this is a conference that Billy Graham founded. It's the evangelistic underpinnings of everything that's happened in global evangelism since the 1970s. It's the most important evangelistic movement on the face of planet Earth. And it's meeting in Korea next year. And 10,000 people were nominated, and less than 2,000 people were selected to get to go. And the only reason I know that is because on Wednesday, I had lunch with one of my friends who was in Chicago who told me about that because he had nominated a bunch of people that didn't get selected. And he's so sad because they didn't get selected. He says, everyone that gets selected has got to go. And so then I look at this girl like I don't know her. But I'm standing there going, I know that, and I know that, and I know that, and I know that, and I know that. And I said, Lausanne's a big deal. You ever been in a conversation, you're like, am I going to insert myself in this conversation? Am I supposed to, or I should just be quiet? I could have just kept walking. But I said, God, I've been thinking about Moses' sister who just shows up and waits her turn to see if she can't rescue her brother. And I was like, okay. And I said to the woman, I said, Jesse, Lausanne's a huge deal. You gotta go. She said, I don't know too much about it. I said, it's the most important evangelistic thing going on the face of planet Earth. You gotta go. And she said, I don't think I have money. I said, can I have your card? Can I pray with you? Can we ask God to provide the resources you need to go because you gotta go? And that night I went home and I was praying about it, and God said, you've got some money. Give it to her. I carried some money. I had some money. It doesn't matter. I had some money. And I was like, you want that money? Can it be somebody else's money? God's like, no, you've got some money. Give it to her. So the next morning I saw her and I said, I'm going to invest in you. You got to go. God prepared in advance. He knew where you're going to be and who you're going to be with and what needed to happen. If you'll step into what God's got for you, you're going to be able to change people's lives. You're going to be a deliverer. You're going to help somebody out of something that they need to get out of. And God's going to use your experience. All that junk you've gone through, all that horrible you've gone through, all that trouble. Moses was born to a slave's home. His mom was a slave. She taught her son for a few months and then borrowed him for a few more and then turned him over to Pharaoh's household. And he became a deliverer of his people because God used all those experiences. I don't know what you're going through, but God could use it to help somebody if you'll let him. Because what does God do? He sees people in trouble. He says, I care about their trouble, and I'm looking for somebody to be a deliverer to help them. You just have to decide if you'll be a person who acts on God's behalf. Will you act on God's behalf? On that night that Jesus gave the disciples this cup, earlier in the garden, it says he prayed. Earlier in the garden, it said he was praying so hard that blood came to his forehead. He prayed so hard that his heart was breaking. And he said, God, if there's any way that this cup could pass by me, God, would it go? But if not, I'll drink it. I know you're here. And you're like, I don't want to be the one. I don't want to have to step up. I don't want to have to go through that pain. I don't want to do what it might be necessary. Jesus understands that, but he says he calls us. And he needs you. And he said that I won't leave you alone in it. I'll step into it. I'll be bread for you. He says, take and eat. In that original meal that Jesus shares, where you read all the stories, you find out in one of the stories, they talk about a cup that's on the table and they don't drink out of it. Because in the Jewish life, there was always an extra cup there, and it was the cup that you would share one day with Elijah. And Jesus says, yeah, we're not drinking that cup today. But one day we'll be in heaven, and we're all going to drink that cup. One day we're all going to be united as one family, and everybody that you invite to the family reunion gets to come. He said there's a cup that reminds us that one day we'll be in Jesus' presence. And all he's going to ask you is, were you the person I created you to be? He's not going to ask you if you were somebody else and did it some other way. He's just going to say, were you the person I needed you to be? One day, we'll be celebrating. One day, I pray that your cup is full and you say, Jesus, I was everything you meant for me to be. He says, welcome, take and drink. Everybody has to decide if they'll be a deliverer. Will they go? As we sing in just a minute, maybe you need to stand up and say, God, I want to have attentive ears and eyes. I want to hear and see, and I'm going to step in and be an answer. I'm going to speak a word for you. I'm going to meet a need for you. I'll help. Maybe you've never given yourself to Christ before, and that's what you need to do today. Say, I want to follow the way of Jesus because he delivered me. Maybe you're in terrible trouble, and God's saying to you right now, I can get you through this. As we stand and sing, would you make a decision for Christ? If it can be public, I'll be here at the front to help you.
And I'm sorry when I've just gone through the motions. I'm sorry when I just sang another song. Take me back to where we started. I open up my heart to you. And I'm sorry when I've come with my agenda. I'm sorry when I forgot that you're enough. Take me back to where we started. I open up my heart.
pointed you to this little tab that's here. It's blank. I'm just praying that you put somebody's name on there. Somebody that you need to help them know that they can be delivered, maybe from sin, maybe from struggle, maybe from crisis. And you're going to be a part of a team of people that's going to reach out to them and help them to come know that God's the answer. And when you write their name there, then you'll come and bring it to the prayer wall, and we're going to say, we're going to see God change some people. We're going to beg God to change some people, and we're going to be part of the answer. As you go, take